Well, there was one funny, then it was not so funny. Well, yeah. This was after the 4 August attack. We were out on patrol. The guys felt we should paint a big target up on the stack, because it's pretty obvious. And we felt we were up there just being a target.
Well, why would the guys want to paint a red target on the stack? Why would they want to do that?
Well, that was their statement. No, but this particular incident, Pat Connell, the gun boss, was up on, he had the deck up topside. The ship was at condition 3, I guess, whatever it was, condition. About a third of the crew was on their battle station. The others were trying to get a fast lunch. So the wardroom people we were down, battle gear on and all of that, and trying to get lunch. We were really concerned about air attack. That would be particularly lethal. So, as it turned out, we were there at lunch. And then all of a sudden the ship gave a great big lurch and rolled. Big booming sound. We looked out the porthole, filled with flying spray out there. So it was an oh my God event here. So the wardroom was leaped to its feet collectively. The captain and XO were nearest to the door, the ladder going up the bridge. So we were all thundering to the door. They were leading the charge. Up the ladder, some guy was coming down. The captain knocked him aside, and so the guy was hanging by his hands on the ladder while the whole wardroom was thundering up this ladder to the bridge and wherever. Captain banged into the pilot house, door smashed open. He hit the GQ alarm because it hadn't gone off. And then went out to the bridge. Here's Pat leaning against the rail. Everything. So what had happened, one of the F-8s coming back from the patrol, he couldn't land with all his ammunition aboard. He had to dump it. So he called up the ship and asked Connell if he wanted an air show when he dumped his ammo. So the plane made a run in and dumped it right alongside. So that's what all the excitement was about, happily. So the captain was so happy that I don't think he yelled at Pat for not letting the ship know that they were about to have a whole load of ammo dumped. Another anecdote, not so funny, but real. When we got back to port after the patrol, we had a message from Sink Pack wanting to know why we had not been flying the U.S. flag during this action. We had no idea who told them that or anything about it, but we had to go back with a message of, well, hell yes, we were flying a flag. Not only that, but it was a battle ensign. It was the biggest flag we had on board. And we did it properly. We didn't lower one and raise the other. We raised the big one first, then we lowered the steaming colors. So there's no question at all about our lowering the flag or striking the colors or anything like that, or not showing the flag. I mean, that's a lot of bull roar. So, but we had to, it was a serious message, so we had to answer that. Another interesting little thing, at night, also on the patrol part of it, after the 4th. Apparently Washington had some report that we were going to be attacked, and so they sent some tugs up to our area being escorted by destroyers. So we picked them coming up from the south, didn't know who they were, making fairly good speed, not PT speed, but not just night steaming either. So we had a plane available to us, so we ran that over them and illuminated them with this 1,000,000 candle watt searchlight, P2. And so we got this highly irritated challenge from the destroyer, senior destroyer, apparently some captain, division, or squadron, Commodore. Anyway, he demanded an explanation from our captain why his ships were illuminated in a battle area. Well, I mean, to us, I mean, who does he think he is? Well, we had to get the captain out of bed, and the captain had to get on the line and explain to this guy that, well, we're in a battle area. You didn't identify yourself. You're lucky you weren't sunk. That kind of conversation. So we had our laugh, and we all carried on. They went home. We weren't being sunk at that time.
There are protocols that you follow on the seas.
We did, after the second attack, when we struck their oil fields, I didn't know anything. I was coming up the deck to relieve the watch in the morning. I saw smoke coming up from an obvious attack ashore, so I felt pretty relieved. You get a psychology, an attitude when you're in a battle situation. And I understand it's a typical one, but I learned quickly that you have to assume that you're on borrowed time and you're already dead, so that way you don't put the emotional energy into trying to stay alive if you know you're not going to make it. All you can do is, well, I hope I go quick with minimum pain kind of thing. And so so when I saw the smoke, that was a real relief, because now finally there was some sort of response. We'd been attacked 2 times, and I wonder how many times a U.S. ship has to be attacked before we get some response from our Washington people. Should have had a response after the first one, and we didn't. So I was really happy to see the smoke, but right at that time I'm walking up, and here comes an F-8 right on the deck, flying down past the ship, sort of a salute to the ship. And they were really beautiful then, in their white and light gray anti-nuke blast paint with a bright camouflage. So that was an emotional time for me. I get emotional right now. Navy Air came through for us. So that was and still is a big thing. We were being backed up, and our guys were there, and we weren't going to be screwed with. So anyway, that meant a lot to me at the time. It was a beautiful sight that point. Saw the aviator in it, kind of thing. But that attack, I got to the bridge, and we had the report that Alvarez had been shot down in his A4. So we were coming up to full speed, headed in to see what we could do. But as it turned out, he'd been shot down in the harbor, already picked up, and so nothing we could do. So we had to break off that. So that was the main excitement for that, as far as we were concerned, for that attack, the response. And then we just had to continue the patrol from that time on for a few days, just to show we couldn't be pushed out of there. It was very hot. The steel on the ship was so hot that you'd get a second-degree burn if you touched it. We had to be buttoned up, battle conditions, for most of the time. So down in the fire room, it was hell down there. We had one BT that had heat stroke. They saved him. They put him in a Stokes stretcher. They strapped in and hauled him up out of the lower deck in the fire room, up several decks up to the main deck, and got him in to the wardroom where the squadron doctor had his our mess table had become the operating table. So they got him on and got some IVs into him and cooled him down and saved his life. So he had some heat strokes, but that was a serious one. So actually nobody really got hurt through all the close calls and the heat and so forth. Can't think of any other particular. The officer in charge of the intelligence detachment, the lieutenant, anytime they picked up something, he'd come running up with a message to the captain and Commodore. And generally, whenever they got a message, something big was going on, we'd go GQ. So the wardroom had seen a movie about voodoo, and the big magician voodoo guy was called the Hairball Man. So we started calling this lieutenant the Hairball Man. We didn't know what magic was coming up next from his cave. Oh yeah, that was pretty hairy. Bennington had become a CVS, anti-submarine carrier, so we had a hunter-killer group, destroyers, and would refuel them, and supplies and so forth. So we had an opposed replenishment exercise with a real sub penetrating our screen, and his mission is come in and sink the carrier. So he'd send up a flare at the time he simulated launching his torpedoes. So we had this new destroyer alongside with lines over, replenishing, and the sub had penetrated the screen. He's inside the screen now. He'd put his scope up once to get one radar bearing, just a flash, which was picked up by our ships. So we got a bearing on that. And so I started helos. I was in combat at the time. So I got helos started over to that bearing. We got a cross bearing because he came up a second time. Well, a couple ships in the screen got the cross bearing. And then he came up for another look and bearing. So we had helos on him. So anyway, at that time, we had him located but not simulated sunk. So he was managed to get off his simulated torpedo and signal an attack. Well, at the time we picked up contact and all this was going on, the captain ordered an emergency breakaway to begin to maneuver to avoid the sub, and with the destroyer still alongside. Now, ordinarily, ship handling or ship people are sharp enough that the carrier can come around and the destroyer follow, even though they're very, very close aboard, and you've got a suction in between. It's a very difficult maneuver. Well, the destroyer didn't do so well in the turn. So the big sponson that comes out from the carrier with the elevator that sticks out there actually hit struck the destroyer's top deck houses, bridge and so forth, and sliced in half, almost half of the whole quarters above, sliced it completely away. So we could see people in the galley and the big galley copper there. They were cooking. Now all of a sudden they're exposed to this big carrier. Well, anyway, so the exciting part of this action, other than major damage, was that part of the equipment that had been shorn from the destroyer was the homing torpedo launcher with 3 torpedoes in it. So the admiral was highly upset and anxious over the fact that we had 3 homing torpedoes in the water along with a submarine that belonged to us. So, after a few minutes of excitement, I determined that torpedoes hadn't started and everything was, and the sub was okay. So that a little side story with Bennington. Oh, Bennington, by the way, something funny. It had lost one of the big elevators that stuck out over the side. And there was, at the time it was carrying away. There was a warrant officer on it, and the thing was being raised, and the big wires that were raising it started parting. So the warrant officer made a running leap when this huge elevator went. So he was able to hook his fingers on the lip of the main deck. So they got him aboard. So some amount of excitement from that. But the funny thing is, when they went into the yard and they renewed the teak wood flight deck the American carriers had, the chief engineer made a coffee table from that wood that was in the same shape as the carrier's flight deck with a number on it and all. And it had an elevator on it. You press a button and the thing would fall off. This coffee table. So that's about all. Oh, my son there was an Anecdote destroyer. My son, years later, obviously, in Gulf War. I was in a missile destroyer, and he was a chief missile fire controlman. So the destroyer was back in the States, going through its refresher training and qualification, and they were supposed to fire a missile the next day, as it turned out. The fire control computer had broken down. The ship's company couldn't fix it. They got shore techs aboard. They couldn't fix it. The shoot was scheduled for the next day. The captain was having kittens, wasn't going to qualify. which is a very bad thing for COs. So Jack got his gunner's mates together, and they all laid on hands and prayed for the computer, which then booted up and everything worked well, and they made the chute. So from then on, at sea, if the captain had a real hairy problem of some sort, why, he'd get on the ship's 1MC to throughout the ship, and Buehler to the bridge, we need a prayer. A lot of funny things happen in the Navy, but by and large, I think I was just, at the end of my 20, I was just happy I was coming up for captain, and by then I had decided to go into religious training. So that's about it.